Hey guys, Philosophers here, and today we're talking about the secrets of building a top war alliance. So today I have got with me the leader of my current alliance, Agent of Chaos, top 25 alliance. It's come up a lot in his leadership from 77th to 24, talking about what we do to manage what he has done to build an alliance that's great at war, all the secrets of everything from your layout to how do you manage and can predict your matchups, know who you're going to face next. All these tricks and secrets he's learned the hard way. And what we've got is we've got him here. He's actually created an outline, and we're going to go through this. And what I want to do as a starting point is talk to you about how war changes at high levels. Because I got to tell you, I joined this alliance back in October, and I joined it. I was in an alliance that was in Gold 4, and we never full cleared the other side, had never done that. And my role in that alliance was being the guy who could help my alliance punch up as big as possible with every attack to try to be as efficient in using my teams to get as much damage on the other side. So my goal in the previous alliance was punching up big to leverage my best teams to get us as many teams down, as many rooms down as possible. But that totally changes at high levels. And I remember coming into this alliance, Night King, and you were preaching to me and to everyone else, play it safe, manage your losses. You do not want to have losses. What our goal here is to have as few losses as possible. Why at high levels is it about managing your losses, making sure that you're as efficient as possible with your attacks by having as few losses as possible?
So in high level war, it's all about offense, and it's about how how many if you can reduce the amount of losses that you have. It's all about building your offense, having the nine strongest offensive teams you can have, and being fast. Blitzing the start, having as many members on as possible, 20, 22 members ready to go, and playing as fast and as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, and at the high levels, if both sides are going to full clear, it's really about who full clears first. And that brings us to something called toes. Toes stands for two on each side. And the reason that you want to what that means is for on each side of a room, what you do is you leave you after you kill the big global rooms like armory or barracks, you leave two rooms up on each side so that you can have something called the race. And what this is when you have a full clear on both sides. So I'm going to show you a video actually of one of our losses where this was when we had a race at the very end. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing people on our side attacking the remaining rooms, and then people on the other side attacking the remaining rooms. And what it is because there was only two rooms available on each side, everyone could attack at once. And it's just a matter of who finishes their attacks first. And of course, whether or not there's a failed attack on each side. And so what you want to do is you want to leave as best as possible one weak team if you can. The other team's of course going to be the last team that was standing, which is why at least at high levels we usually put our two toughest teams at the very end, so that this way at least one of the teams that is going to be up for toes is going to be the toughest. But this is what high level wars come down to, and this is why having so few mistakes matters. And can you explain to us, Night King, why it is that having fewer attacks matters for racing the other side? Fewer losses, I
So
mean.
Right. I'll walk a step back on war. So it's critical that you clear the global rooms first as efficiently as possible, and then after that, you're moving into what we call a race prep, and this is where typically there's six total rooms left, and we call it toes. Some people call it trimming. I've heard it called peeling, but you're essentially you're race prepping. You're knocking back the teams, and as you said, you want to try to keep a really low team as one of these teams, it's just critical that you get the race ready before the third energy drop. In high competitive wars are won or lost most of the time on that third energy drop. And then the video that you're showing, or that you showed, that was right when the energy dropped. And that's why it's important that you have as much of your good teams left as possible, jumping on those last teams to race it out.
Yeah, so you can see here kind of what's happening. This is exactly, how it ends up working. And you can see, by the way, the bonus that the other side received for full clearing first. That's what decides these high level wars. It's how these high level wars are different. But just to be clear, we're not just talking about high level war today. We're going to talk about how to succeed no matter what level you are in war. Now, one factor that you always have to consider, of course, is choosing a zone. So, can you explain to us, Night King, what are some of the factors you want to consider when choosing a zone for your war alliance?
So the biggest thing is you want to make sure that you're in a zone where most of your alliance can participate, at the start and throughout the war, and more importantly, the race. So it's very important that you're in a zone that everyone can participate in.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, look, what I have here is this is an infographic which is going to be it's in the description below. I have a link where it tells you what the times are for each zone that you're in. And essentially, what you want to do is make sure that the times work for your members. And we'll talk later about how there are other considerations regarding matchups for each of the zones as well. Those are important considerations that you need to take into account. Now let's talk a little bit about war expectations. That involves, like, for example, how many attacks people buy, boosts, how early you have to be on to attack. Every alliance has some sort of expectations for their members. How do you decide, Night King, what is the right level of expectation for your members?
Well, the first thing you need to do is just work with your captains and recognize what type of alliance you want to be. Ages of Chaos is a hardcore alliance, so our expectations are pretty easy because we're going 4 refills and max boosts on every war except for those unwinnable wars. We have those three alliances that are 50 to 120 million punch ups that we're not going to push on. And so those are easy wars for our guys to save some resources on. So you just want to you want to create those expectations, and you want to make sure they're out there. You want to make sure you're constantly communicating that to your alliance.
Yeah, and that's important. So, at the higher level you are, if you want to be this hardcore alliance, you're going to have to, on those competitive ones, buy all max attacks and boosts and that sort of thing. At lower levels, there's some lower and mid game alliances that I help and give advice to. I'm in their discords. And for them, it's like a big deal. Do we want to require one boost or two boosts, or do we want to require 7 attacks, 8 attacks, whatever it may be? Those are the sort of things you definitely want to discuss amongst your leadership team and make sure you're on board with, because they're going to help you. Those expectations will help you become more competitive, but they have to match the players that you have in your alliance. Now, attacking early is a big thing when you become more competitive or become hardcore. And why is it, Night King, why is it important to have members there at the start, getting their attacks in the first hour or two of the war?
So the first way that I take it is usually the night before every war. We're in zone 3, so our wars start in the morning. So every night before the war, that's when I make my first post on, hey guys, get ready for war in the morning. If you're going to be late or you got some stuff going on, just communicate that with us so we know. And once we get to the war in the morning, what wins the war typically is the alliance that has the most active people on making the smartest attacks. So you want to keep the war moving. You want to get to a point where you're warring. You've cleared the first flight deck. You go into the second layer, and then you just fizzle out. You want to make sure you can just continue that push to be able to start taking out those global rooms while you have as many global rooms up as possible.
Well, let's talk about this global rooms thing, because that is really a big reason why you want to attack early. And the global rooms are hangar, med bay, barracks, armory. So, what at a high level, for a high level war, then we're going to give the answer for different levels. For a high level war, what rooms do you like to attack for, like, aim for getting down first?
So it really is going to depend on who we're facing. when we're punching up on an alliance that's much stronger than us, let's say a 20 million punch up, I'm not as worried about taking their hangar. Excuse me, their armory first, because frankly, they don't need it. The armory, when you take their armory, that cripples your enemy team's offense. So what I'm looking for, especially when I'm punching up, is I'm looking for those rooms that make their defense smaller. I'm looking for med bay. I'm looking for barracks, and then I'm going to be looking for their armory. But I just want to make sure that I'm clearing security to remove the D down and make an armory as safe as I can so that I can minimize my losses. And it can be an inverse game plan when you're punching down. When you're punching down, it's nothing wrong with taking the opponent's armory first if you run into it first, because you can easily cripple them, making their matchup harder. So it really just depends on not only on what alliance that you're facing, but also what rooms you run into and what order. So it's definitely decision making is going on.
Yeah, I think that that makes a lot of sense. And I will just say, so part of the logic of what he's saying, guys, is that if you take out, for example, barracks and medbay first, or medbay and barracks first, that makes the armory easier to take out because barracks and medbay buff the defense teams, armory buffs the offense teams of the other side. So getting rid of that barracks and the medbay actually makes getting down the armory easier. And he's talking when he talks about engineering. His point is if there are other rooms that are boosting or making that armory stronger, well, if that's where a lot of your opponent's best teams are, you may want to clear those out first. Now, I will just say that at other levels of war it can be different. So if you both sides aren't going to full clear, if you're at a stage in war where in your wars you don't full clear the other side, it could be more important to take armory out first, because what's more important is how the other user control teams are going to do versus their defense teams. Would that be fair to say, Night King?
Yep, that sounds just about right. Yep.
So what about layouts? What I got to tell you something I've never taken a role in. I've been captain in many different alliances, never taken a role in layouts. What should people know about alliance war layouts?
So I think it's a healthy practice to change your layout at least, I would say, every war season. Most alliances, especially at the top level, they will save other opponents' layouts to review when you match them again. So I just think it's a healthy practice to always be kind of changing your layout every season. As far as how to do your layout, that just varies differently. I mean, there's all just like anything. There's always a weakness to the layout. So there's really not too many pointers. I mean, obviously, you're trying to protect your major globals, especially your barracks, med bay, and armory, and that's why a lot of alliances will double buff their armory, which the double buff means it's defensive up and it's defensive down. So it just depends on what you're doing, really.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about communication. What do you mean? Why is communication important during an alliance war?
So wars can be pretty chaotic. I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, it's to me, it's very fun during war because there is so much going on. But just being able to call rooms, to call what to boost. If there's a team that shows up that no one's jumping on it because they're scared of it or don't know what to use. Throwing out, hey, you can use this or this, or hey, who has of that, and just kind of the whole key to war is keeping the war moving. So naturally, communication is a big part of that.
Yeah, now some alliances, I know they literally have people who will tell everybody in the alliance, you attack here, you attack there. We've done that for our final round for the race that you saw earlier, but we don't usually do it other than that. But some alliances do. Other alliances will have you have to ask permission. Say, hey, well, I'm going to use this team on this one. You've got to get it cleared by a captain or the leader. Some alliances actually have a counter sheet, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. That that you can go by, and you have to ask if you don't use the counter sheet. You want to go off the outside the bounds of the counter sheet. I will say for us, we actually never created a counter sheet for our alliance, and you have always sort of preached teaching the members to know for themselves what the right matchups are. So why did you do that? What are the advantages of that? Why not a counter sheet?
So the thing with the counter sheet is it's a one layer tool. So what it does good at is it tells you, hey, X Force can counter mercenaries, and sometimes they'll put like a 10% punch up, or they'll put something on there, and so alliances use it just to kind of a quick reference for their alliance members to be able to identify what's the right counter for a team. What I don't like about it is it cripples people to get to that second and third layer of understanding of the counter. So using X Force and mercenaries as an example, and I know that my X Force can punch up on a mercenaries team, but that's because I've purposely geared my X Force, specifically Negasonic at Gear 14, 6 Red Star, X-23, 6 Red Star, Gear 15, and I know when I'm looking at that mercenary teams, I'm looking to see how he has geared his mercenary team, and I've understand because I've learned, for example, that a Gear 15 Taskmaster, 6 Red Star, 7 Red Star, I know that I can't beat that, or I should say my chances of beating it have been reduced, and so I want to play it safe. So I'm probably going to call someone to BO that team. So that's just some of the second, third layers that a counter sheet won't get to, because it's not taking into account gearing of your own team, gearing of the opponent's own team. It's not taking into account ISOs. It's not taking into account room buffs. So that's kind of why I've always wanted to take the approach of teaching people how to look at their team and how to look at the opponent's team.
It's very important. A lot of times people tell me, "Well, I have a 500K team, or you have a 400K team," and ultimately what matters is the size of the key characters. So, if you have a Shadowland and you have a Gear Tier 15 White Tiger, that's a very different thing than your Shadowland team where your biggest character is Elektra or Daredevil. Ultimately, the same thing as on the inverse. If you got a G15 Taskmaster that you're facing down, that's very different than if you've got the biggest character being Merc Lieutenant, because some guy brought that to DD4 and it inflates the size of the team. So you really have to understand the teams. Now, you talked about BOing it or using a Black Order. Really, this takes us to our next topic about efficiently using your best teams. So, I have these war offense and defense tier lists, which I've linked below, and part of the strategy, if you're an alliance war leader, is making sure you save things like Black Order or Shadowland for the key teams that you need them against. And in the past, of course, that was even more important with Black Order because it was so much stronger than all of the other teams.
Right. So, I mean, you just want to make sure that you're always using the most optimal team as possible, because it's all about offense in the top war. It's about offense, and it's about playing efficiently, and just in being able to identify teams that are giving you the most problem. Just as a the most recent example, Silver Surfer on defense has been causing a lot of issues, and so me, kind of on the fly getting into this week's war, I've said, hey guys, we need to hold off our BO, our Black Order, to use on these Surfer teams, and let's look at using Shadowlands, Dead Bros Hybrid, X Force on these Emerald Marauders teams we have. So you just want to make sure you're kind of looking at that, and making sure people are using the right teams.
Well, and that also comes to the point of building the right teams. One thing that you have always done as an alliance leader is encourage us to build the teams at the top of this list, and I did the same. When I joined, you were pushing people like me to build X Force. This was back, when I joined in October 6 months ago. Now we're in April 2021, and now it's people, you or I posting these things like, for example, here, hey, you're saying here, for example, we need you to, build Shadowland teams and use them against Marauders, so that this way we have our Black Order available to use against the Silver Surfer, that sort of thing.
Exactly. I mean, you always, as a high competitive war alliance, you always want to stay an understanding of where the meta's at, and who are those war offensive teams and what they're good at. And something I like doing a lot of, and I know you do it, is recording those fights and showing it. Hey, here's when I built up my Hella Natural team fighting Wave One Avengers, I was showing and showing my fights, and it kind of, as people see that, wow, that's a good counter, they want to build it as well. So just kind of publicizing that and recording those fights, helps people visualize what the team looks like when it's fully geared correctly.
Now, our next subject here is balancing offense versus defense power. I think that's a really interesting thing. So, what I'll say is on the individual level, what I do is I try to build my top 9 offensive teams as much as possible, because those are, if we are going to go beyond 9 attacks at our level, at high levels in war, we lose. And that obviously, changes at other levels. You may be doing 12 attacks at your level, but once I got those top 9 teams, offense teams built, I don't care about the rest of my offense teams. Then it's all about going on defense and building up my defense. But there's also, I think, Night King, at the alliance level, a strategy where sometimes you're going to actually move some of your teams that are strong off of defense and put them on offense for certain matchups, isn't there?
Right. So in how we war in very high competitive, it's offense. It's all about offense, and what you can do with your offense. So as you say, you build out your 9 teams because you just need 9 attacks to get you to that 30 energy drop. And then whatever else you're looking at putting on defense, you make sure, you do your due diligence and make sure your defense looks fine. But yeah, I mean, depending on if you think you're going to go into a much stronger alliance matchup, you can certainly pull, teams from your defense, like Sinister Six, for example, to go to offense to help combat big wave ones or something like that. So I definitely think it's smart to always kind of be on your toes with how you manage your offensive team.
Well, and that brings us to our next topic, which involves learning about. We're going to talk about predicting your next matchup. And so it helps to know what you want to have on defense if you know your matchup. And so let's just talk here about something. He's listed here something called ELO. So ELO is just essentially a fancy term for the internal matchmaking system that Scopely has to match alliances against each other. So one thing I will just say is when you look here, this is a list that you can get in game of the strongest alliances in terms of TCP. And one thing you'll notice as we scroll down here, for example, is there's an alliance here that is literally in gold 4, but is the 53rd largest alliance in the game. You'll also see that, for example, if you go down here, you'll have alliances that are very far below in the top 100, who are in, let's say, platinum 2, and yet when you go to the top, you might have a top 10 alliance that's in platinum 2, right? These alliances here, there's no way that those alliances could punch up 100 million and compete with these guys. It's all because of these ELO matchmaking system that Scopely has. And so my understanding, Night King, is that you figured out that at least at the top levels, there are ELO brackets of essentially in each zone, the top 8 teams are matching up against each other, and it's not based on TCP collection power. It's not based on your league. It's based on how you've performed in past wars.
Exactly. Some other games are call it MMR, but ELO. So yeah. So from what I understand, is the ELO brackets are every 8 teams. So there's the number 1 team in the ELO bracket all the way down to the number 8, and the matchmaking, without getting too in the weeds, just goes off. It goes off top down. So the number 1 ELO team will match the next top team that they're not in cooldown with. As far as cooldowns reset on that 8th war. So if you matched an alliance, by the time you get to that 8th war, since you match them, that's when you're off a cooldown with them. The way that I am able to predict most of our matchmaking pretty successfully is because I actually have a list and a channel that I keep track of all the alliances we face, and I put dates next to them of when we faced them, and I just keep up with that when teams come off a cooldown. I just know there's a chance that we're probably going to match these teams. Sometimes it gets messed up a little bit whenever teams jump around different zones to chase other teams. That's happened before. We're going to match the number 1 team in the game, Legion, and then another team coming. I think it was Panzer Holt came in and took them because they were the number 1 elo then, and they matched them. And we matched actually a team in the lower elo. So there are chances it could throw off matchmaking depending on how much movement is on the zone.
Right. So at the very top levels here, so he's talking about when you move into zones. So let me just say at these very top levels here, what happens is if you're in a zone where some of these very top alliances are in the top elo, if you happen to be the eighth alliance, the eighth best alliance in terms of how you perform. Like you win a bunch of wars in a row, you're just on a roll. Your reward is if you're in the top eight, now you get to match up with, let's say, Legion all the time or Multiverse or whatever, and they could be 100 million bigger than you, but you're stuck. And people call that the dead zone, and they literally do things like deliberately lose wars to avoid it, or they do like this alliance did in the 50s and they go to a shell to avoid it. So explain what this shell what they're doing here. What is when this FAC alliance that's in gold 4 that's 53rd largest in the game. What are they doing there? Can you explain how that what they're doing? We never did this, by the way.
Well,
Our alliance never does this, but just so people can understand.
well, I'm not sure what that alliance in particular is doing, but I'll just say in general what alliances are doing. So what happens is your elo follows the shell, and when I say the shell, it means the alliance itself. So what happens is these alliances will get in the top elo, and let's say they're the weakest team in the top elo, um, and they want to get out of it. So what they'll do is they'll jump into another alliance shell that has a lower elo associated with that shell. That way, they're able to kind of reset their elo, so to speak. And fight more favorable wars, or in a lot of the cases, easy wars.
Right.
That's just like if we were to jump down into another shell, we would carry our huge CP, and we'd probably be punching down 100 million every war. So what the reason people shell is to essentially get out of their elo.
Yeah, and I will just say, I that's something we've never done. I don't really would not find that sporting or fun at all. They have all these easy wars, but it can be frustrating. People get in this sort of dead zone here, and because there are, of course, some of the very large alliances in the game are so large that it can be very difficult to match up. So these top alliances move around a lot between zones because let's say if you're Legion or Panther Hulk or Baby Yoda or whatever, or Smash House, you want to you want to match up against one another. So you're moving zones to try to get those matchups. And when you move zones, you end up facing the top ELO in that zone. Is that right?
Yes, but it's because you take your elo with you. So
Mm.
that's the big kicker there, taking your elo with you. So that's why they know the number one elo in zone one. They know they're going to match the top elo in zone three when they move, and so that's why they chase it. But that's why they chase each other. They know they're out of cooldown with them, and they'll move because they take their elo with them.
All right. Well, look, that's something people have always asked me because I tell people whether, saying platinum 1 or platinum 2 or gold 4 doesn't really mean anything. This is why it's all based on this silly matchmaking system that Fox Next, Scopal Next, whatever, should make a lot better. But let's talk. I want to talk, before we go, I want to talk about something very important that you do. I think it's really a key to your success as an alliance. I think no matter what level you're at, it really matters for you. One thing you've done after every single war I've ever been in with you, you've always posted every single failed attack, every defeat. You post them all on the Discord. So you put a whole list, and then at the end of the list, okay, you'll post the whole list. Then at the end of the list, you will literally tag each person and give an explanation of what they could have done better. And usually people respond. And some of us, like myself, I'll explain, yeah, here's what I think I did wrong. Here's how I think it failed. Why do you do that? Why do you think that's so important to your alliance's success?
So as we started, and this all started last year, as we started progressing in war and we were winning most of the time, um, I quickly realized that offense is the way to go and being efficient is the way to go. So if you can minimize your losses, you're going to win the war. So what I started doing, and at that time it was like 30 or 40 losses, we would get a war, and I would painstakingly snap all those screenshots and look at them. And then, when you start doing this for the first time, you start seeing some really silly stuff. I mean, you see like counters that no one should do. And as you progress through that, and as you pointed out, I'm talking with these people about that. Some are just low hanging fruit. Hey, don't use that. That's a wrong counter. And then you get, and as you go through that over the weeks, I started noticing that my screenshots started getting smaller and smaller. I went from screenshotting 35, 40 screenshots after every war to 30-35 to 25-30, 20-25, and then now most of our wars now we're losing just between 8 and 15 for the most part, and so it's a lot more manageable now because of what I did in the past to go through that. I think that's a very critical part of understanding why it is an alliance is failing, and a lot of the stuff people are still misplaying matchups, and of course there is RNG sometimes. The Cargo Bay is infamous for spawning with buffs and stuff, and you see those, you move on. But it's about getting to that deeper layer of understanding what your alliances do. And the other thing that this uncovers is when you can eventually see what teams you're screenshotting nothing but mercenaries beating you. You start to realize that, and that's how I realized, going back to the example on Mercs, that's when I realized that that Gear 15 Taskmaster, for example, made the difference. So you can kind of start picking up on things like that as you look and see what's causing you issues.
Yeah, exactly right. And this, I think, is key because this shows it creates a culture of accountability where we all are trying to improve. It goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is making sure members understood themselves the counters. It forces people to learn and improve. And it creates a culture that, hey, we all learn from our mistakes. We're all trying to improve together. And like you said, it helps you see those trends. So look, this is a tip, by the way, that works in every alliance. I've done this. I did this back when I was in Gold 4 in a different alliance. I did some of this. I know that you may have so many attacks it's harder to do, but doing something like this, if you want to get better, is going to help you learn by dissecting them, and it's going to help your members learn. So look, if you like this content, if you have questions for Night King, go to our Discord. The link is below. He'll be on it. You can even tag Night King on it, but he'll be reading there and answering your questions. And look, press that like button, subscribe to this channel. We also have our Discord below. We go there, we discuss all sorts of stuff. We also have our Twitch stream below where I talk about topics like this all the time.